Kamala Harris calls it the most consequential election of our lifetime. Her Republican rival Trump promises to launch the largest mass deportation in US history if he returns to power. Poll figures point to a dead heat as campaigning enters its last week. The world, meanwhile, waits with bated breath for the next US president. Hello and welcome to our special programming on the US presidential elections. I'm Parikshat Luthra. The US presidential election next week would bring an end to what has been a bitter election campaign. On one hand, Democrats, Kamala Harris pitchforked herself as the only candidate who would uphold the Constitution and the values it serves. On the other, Donald Trump is piggybanking on his anti-immigration and protection stance to land a second presidency. The big question that we're asking today is Trump or Harris, who would be beneficial from India from a diplomatic and trade point of view? We will come to that in just a bit. But first, let's listen into the candidates making a pitch for the White House.
November 5th, 2024, 9 days from now, will be Liberation Day in America. It's going to be Liberation Day. On day one, I will launch the largest deportation program in American history. I will end inflation. I will stop the invasion of criminals coming into our country. And I will bring back the American dream. We need the American dream.
Here in Pennsylvania right now, each of us has an opportunity to make a difference. Because in this moment, we do face a real question. What kind of country do we want to live in? That's before us right now. What kind of country do we want for our children and our grandchildren? A country of chaos, fear, and hate, or a country of freedom, justice, and compassion?
I'm now joined by Navteej Sarna, former Indian ambassador to the United States. John R. Blank, foreign policy expert, also joining us. Mr. Blank has served as a policy advisor to Joe Biden when he was a senator. M.R. Rangaswamy, founder of Indiaspora, also with us. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being with us on CNBC-TV18. Ambassador Sarna, let me begin by asking you, this election right now is extremely close. Possibly the election is already decided. What can change from now till the 5th of November?
Thank you, Parikshat. I lost your question for a minute, but I think from what you're saying, it is a very, very closely tied election. And essentially, they are looking at 7 swing states where also they are tied. So there's a very small number of people who are ultimately going to decide this election. So we just have to wait and see. And it's also been a very bitter election campaign. So I think whoever wins, the country would be happy to see the end of this campaign.
Right. Mr. Rangaswamy, getting you in at this point, Kamala Harris, she is leading in several key polls, but it's still within the margin of error. How do you see her support base? How do you see the Indian diaspora represented in the Senate? Because winning the presidency is one, and having a majority in Senate is going to be important as well.
Yeah, so the Indian community in the battleground states are the key. We have about 400,000 Indian American citizens in those 7 battleground states. And the polling there shows anywhere between 30 to 50-point lead for Kamala Harris amongst our community. So what this means is our community in those 7 states can make a big difference between victory or defeat. And we hope this week is Deepavali. So I hope we can shed light over darkness and good over evil. Let's see what our Indian brothers and sisters in these 7 states decide. So I think that really is where it stands. And of course, today I'm actually in Washington, D.C., getting ready to attend President Biden's Diwali party at the White House. So a lot of things Indian are going on in D.C. as well.
Right. Of course, the Diwali party at the White House is a highlight every year. John R. Blank, to get you in, as someone who has followed Joe Biden very closely, even when Biden won the election, the mood of the electorate and considering the voter base that Donald Trump had, you could not ignore or overturn some of his policies, for example, tariffs vis-a-vis China for that matter. Even if Kamala Harris wins this election tomorrow, which are the policies where we are going to see continuity from the Donald Trump era? Are we going to see her more aggressive towards China for that matter?
Yeah, well, thank you, Parikshit, for having me on the show. I think we're going to see a lack of any kind of similarity with Trump's positions if we see a Harris presidency. The areas in which Joe Biden continued policies that had already been in place under Trump are really rather minor. The tariffs were specifically those geared at supply chains and other matters where we just didn't want to have specific sectors of the U.S. economy reliant on China. That's very, very different from what Trump is promising to do in his next term if he's elected, which is an across-the-board 10% tariff on India, on every other nation in the world, rising much higher, basically on his own personal whim.
Right. Ambassador Sarna, coming back to you, what does this election really say about the mood in America? If Donald Trump were to win today, tomorrow that is, what will this mean about the mood of the electorate, and what do they want from the US president and his connect with the world?
Well, I think, Parikshit, we can't forget the fact that this is very closely tied. And therefore, you can't say that if Trump wins, the entire United States is looking at it from a particular point of view. Having said that, I think the country is deeply divided. There's a very strong sentiment moving towards, being attracted by Donald Trump in terms of America first, in terms of isolationism, in terms of not getting involved, not being so-called, quote-unquote, being taken for a ride or becoming a target for immigrants from all over the world, particularly illegal immigrants. There's the economy issue, on which they are playing in terms of taxes, etc. So again, Donald Trump is appealing to his core constituency and to those who sympathize with them. And these are not, these are against the internationalist attitude that the United States has followed, the liberalist attitude that earlier generations would have followed. And I'm afraid that is the kind of trend. You're going to see climate denial, for instance. There's been a lot of talk of, drill, baby, drill, and starting fracking and so on and so forth. So I think there are a lot of regressive policies that are attached. There is also a very mercantile attitude towards trade. A kind of trade balance is the gold standard, and not trade which is for the global good or for ultimate good for every country. So I think there are a lot of inward-looking policies that I'm afraid have been promised. How much of this will be followed is a separate question, because in Trump's first term, we saw the same thing, that he said a lot but didn't do all that when he actually came to power.
Right. Important points there. Let me go across to Mr. Rangaswamy. Mr. Rangaswamy, if we look at the Indian diaspora and also people going to the United States as skilled professionals who go on H1B visas, this has always been a concern. Do you expect a Donald Trump presidency to crack down on this H1B visa program?
I think that's a big question mark here in terms of what the next president will do in terms of both legal immigration and also with people here who are staying without visas. And unfortunately, India is caught in both segments. There's a huge group of H1B visa holders who are waiting to see where they go and where they end up. But also India now, unfortunately, is the second largest group of people here staying without visas. I think it's the estimates are about 725,000 Indians have either overstayed or are in this country without visas. So I think India is going to have to deal with two separate issues both on the legal, H1B to green card to citizenship kind of cycle, and also on the other side as well. So this is a big question mark. We do not know exactly what Trump will do if he comes back. I think with Kamala Harris, there'll be a more nuanced policy in that regard. So I think in general, I would say a Kamala Harris presidency might bode better for immigrants and immigration to the U.S.
Right. Connected with that, Jonna Blank, just yesterday, we had seen a press statement from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security that they, along with the Customs Department of the United States, had sent back a charter plane which was carrying Indians who could not establish a legal presence to be in the United States. Essentially, this was illegal migration or human trafficking, as they called it, and they said that this plane had been sent back to India. Do you expect more such crackdowns to happen if Donald Trump were to win? Or how would Kamala Harris deal with this problem, considering that illegal immigration is also something that Biden has been tackling?
Yes, well, illegal immigration, I think, is going to be cracked down upon regardless of who wins. But I think that Mr. Rangaswamy is absolutely right that we're dealing also with legal immigrants and with people who basically have in some cases, let their paperwork get out of line. These are not, as Trump describes them, vicious killers or rapists or dangers to the country. And these are people who are all going to be endangered if we have the mass deportation that Trump is explicitly promising. Also, my old friend, Ambassador Sarna, is absolutely right that we're seeing a lot of, frankly, disturbing things happening in America right now. A lot of the rise of racist sentiments, of bigoted sentiments. We saw them just yesterday at Madison Square Garden, where people were, from the podium, Trump's own chosen speakers were attacking Kamala Harris in frankly racist ways. And I'm really embarrassed at the degree to which this mindset is so much a part of the Trump phenomenon.
Right. Speaking about tariffs, Ambassador Sarna, we have often discussed this with you as well. The Harley-Davidson was a big tariff issue that Donald Trump used to always raise. Now, Harley-Davidson has moved out of India. They've given contract manufacturing to somebody else. But the tariff war, do you expect Donald Trump to get into a sort of a tariff war with India? Because he's called India a great friend, Prime Minister Modi a great friend, but also in the same breath, India is the biggest abuser of tariffs?
Yes, I think, honestly speaking, the Harley-Davidson was a non-issue, but it became a big bee in his bonnet. Fortunately, that would be behind us. He's also called us tariff king in the past. So I think tariffs will come back in some form or the other. You should also remember we lost the GSP. So tariffs will come back. The trade balance issue will come back. And we will have to keep working on it. It's not a wall that can't be crossed. It's one factor in a broad relationship. You see, Trump gets the strategic, the security, the defense deals, and all that. And this will be, trade will be an issue, H1B queues will be an issue. And, well, that's it. No matter who comes, there will be nuances which will have to be worked upon by our diplomatic establishment. And I'm sure they will do it. There'll be issues in the Congress. If say Harris comes, for instance, there could be issues in tariff, in trade, in immigration. There could be issues on our relationship with Russia. So these are moving parts. But I think no matter who comes, the importance of the India-US relationship is recognized by the overall establishment and by both of them. So I think we will continue on this trajectory. And depending on who is in the White House, we'll have to adjust our game.
Absolutely. Mr. Rangaswamy, Kamala Harris literally introduced herself to America as a presidential candidate just a few weeks back when Biden stepped aside. We always knew her as the Vice President Kamala Harris. How much do you think America has got to know her in the last few weeks? What about you? What about the Indian community's engagement over the last 4 years with Kamala Harris? What do we know of her and her views?
Yeah, again, personally, I've known Kamala Harris for over a dozen years. Since I live in San Francisco, she was our district attorney, and then she was our attorney general and senator, and really gotten to know her over time. And what I can say about her personally is that she grows from strength to strength in her jobs. Quick learner, adapts to the situation, and moves along. So from that point of view, I think she's very fit to become the president. Now, in terms of her policies, the Indian community is getting to know her better and better. In fact, when she was vice president, she's even had Diwali in her own house the last few years. So it's not like she says she's Indian or Black, or she's reaching out to all communities. The challenge overall for the United States, though, is to get to know her in the past 2 or 3 months. You know, who is she? What does she stand for? What are her policies? And that's what she's been trying to do over the past few weeks, is in each area, whether it's abortion rights, or if it's the economy, or drug prices, and so on and so forth. She's really trying to articulate and tell people who she is and what she stands for. And hopefully, you know, they've learned enough, but obviously more people are only tuning in to the elections this week. You know, most people outside of Washington really haven't been paying attention. This is the week, I think, the undecideds and people who go to vote are actually going to take a look at the two candidates and make their final decisions.
All right. On that note, we'll take a short break. We request all our guests to stay with us. We'll be right back for final comments. Welcome back. You are watching this special coverage on the US elections. We still have Mr. Sarna, Jonna Blank and MR Rangaswamy. Navdeep Sarna, finally to you, Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, who do you think will be better for India, and what will India now have to keep in mind while engaging with an American presidency after elections?
I think, Parikshit, as we've been trying to say over the last 10 minutes or so, I think it's not a question of who's going to be better for us. The fact is that whoever is in the White House we'll have to recognize the importance, the logic of the India-US relationship, and we will work with them. There will be nuances of personality. There will be nuances of emphasis on different issues. And I think no matter who comes, we'll have to handle it in mutual interest. It's also important for the United States that India be handled, the relationship be handled properly. I would just like to
Ambassador
say...
Sarna, any unfinished agenda?
No, I think on the bilateral side, there's a lot happening. There's a lot in the pipeline, particularly, for instance, the critical and emerging technologies deal that was done a couple of years ago. We have to actually put meat on that bone. There's this whole semiconductor thing which is happening. There is the transfer of technology on the defense deals, which has to be pushed and carried forth. But also, I think what is more important is the impact of how they treat other issues on India. For instance, how do they treat the Ukraine conflict? How do they treat the Gaza or the Gaza-Lebanon conflict? What is their attitude towards the Indo-Pacific? And what is their attitude ultimately on China? I think all of these and some other issues have an impact on India-US relations in one way or the other. And therefore, those are the issues that we will also have to watch depending on who comes in, where you might see a greater differential than on the bilateral relationship alone.
All right, let me go across to John Blank. John Blank, final thoughts. What are some of the challenges between the India-US relationship, which you hope the two sides will be able to overcome after the elections?
Well, I think that under Kamala Harris' presidency, we would see a continuity with U.S. past positions, both Republican and Democratic, as Ambassador Sarna has said. But we've got to remember that is not how Donald Trump does foreign policy. Donald Trump's foreign policy is entirely based on what's good for Donald Trump. We saw that vis-a-vis India during his first term, where he really ran a lot of big dangers by making fun of Prime Minister Modi's way of speaking, by even openly saying that he was going to personally negotiate a Kashmir settlement, which Prime Minister Modi had to slap down very explicitly. We got through that period without a major rupture, but we have to remember that Donald Trump is not a normal Republican candidate. He's really his own type of person, and that will be entirely unpredictable if he gets into power again.
All right. Final comments from M.R. Rangaswamy. Mr. Rangaswamy, we have seen the Five Eyes sharing information, evidence related to India's activities relating to Sikh separatism and Sikh separatists abroad. And the US has shared evidence with India. India has launched an inquiry. Do you expect this issue to become a thorn in ties after the elections? Or do you think that considering the larger focus of bilateral relations, considering the big business and manufacturing partnership we have today, the US will be able to overlook anything like that?
Yeah, I think US and India have built, like both other people said, tremendous relationships, tighter relationships across the board, whether it's with the diaspora, whether it's with business, whether it's I2U2 or the Quad relationships and transfer of technology and business deals. I think we're really, really intertwined so much. I think that is going to be in play as well in terms of where we move forward. So I think I agree that under Kamala Harris, it'll be more of a continuity of relationship. With Donald Trump, it's going to be more unpredictable. But in either case, the two countries have so much in common and so much that we can do together. I think long term that will prevail.
All right. Both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump will finally look at a long-term picture, even though their approach to India may be different. Thank you very much, Navteet Sarna, John Blank and M.R. Rangaswamy for joining us. That's all we have time for on this special US election coverage. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.